So just a couple of things about teaching artists and arts education. We're fortunate and privileged to have a number of teaching artists, not only with us as panelists, but also as attendees today. Fantastic turnout representing arts education. And arts education, you know, teaching artists are the utility players, the versatile, sort of omnipresent ingredients that keep arts education up and running in schools, in communities, in so many ways. And so, and like everyone else, everyone in the arts and everyone pretty much in general, it's been a challenging year for teaching artists. Difficult to have access to the places where you would normally work and the people that you would normally work with. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to just really kind of revisit and put a spotlight on the work of teaching artists. And specifically to just sort of remind everyone the variety of ways that teaching artists' work gets done, and by the variety of artists that are involved in that work, and the range of ways that that teaching artists reach both K through 12 students, but also just the community in general. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from an individual teaching artist, and that's Adam Booth. We're going to hear from two people who have been involved in an arts education project that was initiated very much at a school level. So we're going to hear from Kellee Waddell from Pendleton County Schools, and Ime, who is the teaching artist on that project. And then we're going to hear from Cindy Dearborn at the Huntington Museum of Art, really about a kind of a comprehensive approach to incorporating teaching artists into the work of a really multifaceted, larger regional arts organization. So a number of different ways that teaching artists have impact, and a few different models to consider. And certainly not every model or every approach of teaching artists is going to be represented here today. So unfortunately, we do have, as I said, many other teaching artists as participants today. So, please feel free to join in the conversation as we go. And again, welcome to everyone. So just quickly, by way of introduction, I'm going to introduce all of our panelists right now, and then we'll just go to each person one by one for their presentations. So we're pleased to have Adam Booth with us today. Adam is a nationally touring storyteller based in the Eastern Panhandle. His professional storytelling appearances include premier storytelling events across the country, such as the International Storytelling Center and the National Storytelling Festival. He's a member of the Recording Academy, Grammys, and he's the inaugural storyteller in residence at Shepherd University. And that's Adam Booth, and we're going to hear from him in just a minute. And we're also pleased to be joined by Kellee Waddell. And Kellee is the school counselor at North Fork Elementary in Pendleton County. And last year, she served as the Community and Schools site coordinator for Franklin Elementary. And while she was there, she coordinated a STEAM project grant that brought local musicians into all 4 schools in Pendleton County for a songwriting project. And that's what we're going to hear more about today. One of the teaching artists involved in that project was Ime, who is a singer and songwriter and musician, and who took the lead on teaching artistry in that project. And like so many other teaching artists, that's only one tiny piece of what she does in her overall work as an artist. And we'll hear more about that from Ime in just a little bit. And then finally, we have Cindy Dearborn from the Huntington Museum of Art. And Cindy began working at the Huntington Museum as the Museum and Schools coordinator. And in that capacity, she managed the volunteer docent corps of over 40 tour guides, developing curriculum-based school tours and engaging adult tours. She was promoted to Director of Education in 2018 and now supervises all the museum's educational initiatives. And Cindy has a BFA from the New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University, where she focused in ceramics and glass. So that is our panel for today. Great collection of artists and teaching artists with a lot of really interesting experience. And Just so pleased that you all would put some work into this session and share your thoughts about teaching artistry and your work with our whole conference today. So with that, I will welcome Adam Booth to the stage.
Thanks, Jim. And good morning, everybody. It's really great to get to be here. It's an honor to be with this panel and to be representing teaching artists. I love the state so much, so that's why I say it's an honor to get to be here. I grew up in Cabell County with a very strong tradition of storytelling in the family. And now I live in Jefferson County. So I've traveled from one side of the state over to the other. And I live here in Jefferson County, and I make my career all around the country. So I have been a professional storyteller for 16 years, and my emphasis is in Appalachian storytelling, both contemporary and traditional. And this work has taken me to festivals and schools and events in 26 states and 2 countries. And I want to speak a little bit, I've been invited to speak a little bit today about being a teaching artist as part of that arts career. And one thing that I've really learned as a truth in that is that being a teaching artist is much more than being an artist who gives educational presentations. And so I want to talk you through some of my experiences as a teaching artist. And hopefully this will be informative for people who are teaching artists or want to be teaching artists, as well as to institutions that are hoping to work with teaching artists. So as my career grew, one thing that I kept hearing from festivals was, what workshops do you give? And then I would hear from schools, what workshops do you give? In addition to telling stories. And I thought, well, this is funny. I guess I need some workshops to give, some way to share the art that I create. And so I thought, well, I can teach people how to tell stories. And then I thought, can I? Do I actually know how to do that? And are people interested in learning how to tell stories? Doesn't everybody understand the importance of storytelling and the benefits of it? I just presumed that because I'm in a field where everybody believes in the value of this particular art. But I came to find that you can never presume that people know anything about the work that you do, especially as an artist. You have to tell them what you do, and then you have to tell them what you do, and then you have to tell them again and again and again what it is that you do as an artist and what you can offer. So let me get my slide up here. So as I mentioned, there's me telling a story in a one-room schoolhouse in Tennessee. As I mentioned, I was already telling stories in public spaces, such as to this school right here, when I started to think about what I could offer to institutions as a teaching artist. And I sat down and really asked 2 questions. What can I offer? And what can my art offer to people and to institutions? And so I sat down to make a list about what it is that I can offer and what storytelling can offer. And here is just a short list of some of those things that I believe that my art does. Storytelling develops imagination and creativity. It explores difficult or scary situations in a safe and trusted environment. It fosters responsible decision-making and ethics. I mean, how many times have we heard a story where we're thinking, no, don't go that way? Storytelling builds compassion and interpersonal skills. It allows for inclusivity and participation. If you can see and or hear, then you can participate in storytelling. And most people are able to participate in at least one of those ways. It grows the skill of listening and also our ability to understand nonverbal cues. Storytelling explores multiculturalism, and it easily links to other art forms, which for me are readily music and dance and 2-dimensional art. So I made this list of what my art can offer. And then I started to think, well, what are the things that I love that can be expressed via storytelling? Can I take those loves of mine and put them into potential workshops? So I started to create a blend of those two things, what storytelling can offer and the things that I love to do. And I started to flesh out descriptions and titles. And here are some examples of what those started to look like. An introduction to Appalachian stories. I love Appalachia, and I love teaching people about the cultural diversity of stories in Appalachia. Critical thinking for story development. I love it when people are exercising their minds, especially students. And I thought, well, well, storytelling can help us with that. We can learn about critical thinking via story. What can we learn from Jack? Jack is a really common character in Appalachian storytelling. Another workshop I created was called The Big Bag of Junk. How can we take a bunch of junk and create a story around it so that we understand we don't have to be a professional artist to make good art. We can just draw upon everyday items and create good art, good stories. Teach your students to be better liars. So here I'm thinking about how to kind of sell the art that I'm doing to someone that might want to work with me. And I cut my chops in the West Virginia Liars Contest before I turned into a professional storyteller. So that's part of my background. And storytelling in country music and country songs. And this is aiming specifically at middle school and high school students. How can we take something that's popular and turn it into a lesson? And of course, I remained open to other ideas as I started to prepare what I could offer. So I thought, well, now I have some workshops. I took these and created, and others, and created a one sheet where I have descriptions of each workshop and ages that are good for doing these, because sometimes a workshop is good for third graders and not for 12th graders, and vice versa. Sometimes it's good for the community through a museum. And I created that, and then I said, well, what do I do with it now? So being entrepreneurial, I created some advertising materials. The very first one I did was a brochure. I had a brochure printed up that explained different types of assemblies and workshops that I offer, some quotes from people. And I mailed one of these out to every school in West Virginia. If someone contacted me back based upon it, then I entered into a conversation about how we could bring storytelling to their community. Over time, I learned that that doesn't always happen immediately. Sometimes I would hear from someone that said, I've had your brochure on my desk for 4 years and we're ready to talk. I said, okay, great. It didn't just disappear. I also learned that doing something like that is expensive, and I run a business. So I switched that to a postcard that has information on the back that also links to a page on my website that is hidden from the public so that I can keep track of how many people are accessing it based upon this mailer. And I send those out, and as soon as someone's interested, we start to converse about how my art and that community can come together so that we can have a good partnership. So start to sell myself, and then comes some reality. What happens when I get there? What am I supposed to actually do? And for me, a big question was time, thinking about time. Does time allow me to demonstrate my art separately from the teaching? And I try to make it so that that is possible, so that I can demonstrate my art to the community or to the student population. I'm going to speak specifically about students because I do a lot of this with schools. And it's much easier for me if I can tell stories to the students before I go into the classroom. Here's an image from one of my very favorite school visits ever. I love looking at the faces of these children and just the myriad reactions. I can remember the exact moment in the storytelling assembly when this happened. And if I can get in front of them first and demonstrate my art, then there's some anticipation for me to come to the classroom, and they're excited to talk to me and learn with me. And I'm excited because I know them already. So I try to make that happen as I schedule the day, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And sometimes I have to demonstrate the art in the classroom, which is okay. It just kind of changes the way I manage my time. Now, because I don't like to reinvent the wheel every time I'm working as a teaching artist, because I like to save my creative time for working on my own art, I have a pretty standard formula for how I work within the classroom. First, we listen to a story with a formula. And in storytelling and folklore, a formula is a story where the narrative has a pattern. So we start to learn that elements are going to repeat. If you think of the story of the Three Little Pigs, that's a real basic one. That's not a story I tell, but you think the pig builds a house, the wolf comes and threatens, it blows it down. Then we hear all that again. Same thing happens, we hear it again. That's a formula, and it works really nicely for students if you have a short amount of time because they start to learn what's going to happen. So there's demonstration. And then we always analyze. And this is where I start to bring in the specific lesson that I've been asked to come in and work with the students. We analyze together. The whole class does this, and this is so that I can check their comprehension. Then we start to create. I give them a task where they are to create a story based upon the one that I've just given as a model. And instead of having everybody creating one big story, I break them into smaller groups. This group over here, you work on the first part of the story where the protagonist failed. This group right here, you have the second task for the protagonist. And this group over here, you're going to work on the ending of the story where the protagonist succeeds. And then in those small groups, they start to work. And this is done with movement, it's done with talking, it's done with illustrating. I'm a big fan of bringing in other art forms. And so here's an example of a story that some students I worked with in St. Louis were illustrating. Here's another one. If we can illustrate our stories, then we can tell them. And I like to work with drawing because not every student is able to read or write. Especially at the level that maybe their peers are at. But if they can draw, then it starts to turn their imagination to the point that they can tell a story. Once we do that, we tell it together. And I work as a narrator so that they see me in front of the class and I'm still in charge of the classroom, but I'm slowly giving ownership of the art to the students. We have a volunteer from each of these groups come up and I frame the story. And then now you tell me the part of the story your group came up with. And then now you tell me the part that your group came up with, and so on. And once we've told the whole story together, then in pairs, they elaborate and they tell this whole story to each other. So now they have greater responsibility. And ultimately, we get to the point where they're writing. And they write the whole story that they have now said or heard, and they're doing this individually. And this is usually when I leave the classroom because 45 minutes is not a lot of time, and that's about how much time I usually have in a single class. And I leave at this point with them having more work to do because I want them to know that the creativity that we've spent our time on doesn't end when I'm not there. And I want the teacher to take over some of the ownership of that so that she or he can relate that into the other lessons that they have. And you might notice that I have this triangular structure to what's happening here. We start where everybody is together and I'm in charge. And slowly I'm ceding my ownership of the project. And slowly we're taking away members of the group so that we're building confidence and independence in the creation of the art until we have one person doing it by themselves, and that's the individual student. And what I've learned over time is students that are marginalized participate this way. Students that often have some sort of maybe social disadvantage or economic disadvantage or academic disadvantage compared to their peers that maybe don't always participate, they participate in this case. Here's an example of some coverage that we had this is in the Moorfield Examiner. And I'm working with these students here on creating a story based off of this toy snake right here. When we work with this model, what I find is that Children often remember me when I come back to the school, maybe a year later or 2 or even 3 years later. And because I've empowered them with the art, what happens is they can often tell me not only the stories that I shared with them, but also the stories that they created a long time ago. I think that's just incredible. So I like to think that, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could just practice our art without having to do anything else? And we would all love to live that dream, but it doesn't always work that way. So I want to share a few pragmatic considerations before my time is over. What should I do before I get there? Well, presume nothing. How do you get to the school? Or how do you get to the museum or wherever it is that you're working? Y'all know here in West Virginia, we cannot rely upon GPS. And often directions get us to a place that doesn't exactly get us to the building. So how do I get there? Where do I park when I get there? Are there visitor spots designated for me? Or are the spots numbered? I'm gonna have to know what number to park in. What is the bus schedule at the school? Often the buses line up where the visitors park. And if you don't know the bus schedule, then you're going to get stuck in the parking lot for some time until the buses leave. What are your lunch options? Can you eat in the cafeteria? Is there a cafeteria? Can you bring your own meal in? Is there a restaurant in town where you can go and eat quickly if you have a break? Do you have a contract? Is there other paperwork the school system needs? Do they need a W-9? Do they need a business license? What identification do you need to get into the building? And then when you get there, what do you do? How are you going to control the students? If you're not used to being in a classroom, you have to think about maintaining control over the students. And I'll tell you one thing that really works well for me that I've learned. I take this little toy into the classroom, no matter what age I'm working with. It's called a carousel bell, and it spins like this. It has these little bells on it. And I tell the students, I'm not going to raise my voice. I want you to work. I want you to play. I want you to be creative and move as we're working. But as soon as you hear this, you have to return to your seats and give me your attention again. And it sounds like this. And even though it looks very elementary, it works great for high school students too. And I never have to raise my voice, and they start to anticipate the sound of that neat thing. And do I need my own teaching materials? I can't presume that the school will provide anything to me, including water or a snack. I need to know where the teacher's lounge is, where's the bathroom, where's the emergency exit in case there's a fire drill, because that might happen. And a really important consideration, who are you representing when you're in the school? I learned early on that often I'd go into a school and the boys would flock to me. And I couldn't figure out why that was until I really started to analyze, and I learned that I was the only man in the school. And in many situations, I go into a school and I'm the only man that the children see all day long. And that turned uh, my being a teaching artist into a greater role of representation so that these children see how a man interacts with other people. And that's not always the case, but it is an additional duty that I carry when I go into a school as a teaching artist, which is why it's more than just practicing my art. And whatever you represent when you go into that space, you have to think about representing it responsibly. And then when I leave, what do I do after I've been there? I always follow up. I write a thank you note. I check on paperwork. I check on the payments. I would say about 50% of schools I go into forget to pay me. And that's not usually the school's fault or the teacher's fault. It's, could be the county. It could be a slow process. You always have to check up on that. And I also thank sponsors. Sometimes I go into a community where the grocery store or a local insurance agency provides the money for this to happen. And I want them to know that their money was used for something to better the community. So I thank them as well. And over time, I learned to develop a relationship with schools and communities that I really like to go and visit. So in my last minute here, I want to let you know that in addition to being a teaching artist and a traveling artist, I also run a storytelling concert series here in West Virginia. It's called Speak. Speak Story Series is our website if you want to check us out. We bring storytelling artists from around the world to West Virginia. Right now, we're in our 9th season, and these are the 12 storytellers that we're bringing in the 12 months this year, representing 5 countries and 8 states in the US. And in a conventional season, not only do they give a concert to the public, but we send them into the public schools and into public spaces to teach about their art and to share workshops. And so beyond this time or in the question and answer session, I'd be happy to talk about that as well. It just so happens we have a concert tonight and we're giving these online. Here's some of our artists in school spaces. But if you'd like to come tonight as a participant in Arts in Our Communities this week, you can use this code at the bottom, WV Arts, and get a half-price ticket to the show tonight. It's at 7:30. I've reached the end of my time, so if anybody has any other questions beyond today, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to talk about my experiences or talk to you about bringing storytelling to your communities.
Adam, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Really thoughtful and detailed insight into your approach as a teaching artist. You know, I'm sure that so many of the participants here today can connect with the sense of engagement that you clearly have with your students, and anybody just getting started as a teaching artist or in arts education work can really, there's a lot of great information there about the really practical details of your profession, of your craft, the reality of being a teaching artist. So thank you very much. And everybody remember, Speak Story performance tonight at 7:30. And you can find out about that. The Speak Story series website is also listed in that folder of, there's an arts education links document in that folder that you can check out as well. Okay, thanks, Adam. Let's move on to Pendleton County. And Kellee, we're going to hear from Kellee Waddell and from Ime. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Adam, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing about your work. I hope one day you can come out to Pendleton County and speak with our students. I would love that. Let's see, let me take a moment to pull up a presentation. Share sound. All right, you good? Am I in? Okay. Yes, thank you so very much for having me here today. This is a real treat to be a part of this conference and to be collaborating with this group of people. I'm here today to be sharing a little about a STEAM grant project that we worked on last year. It was called The Songs of the Students. And it was a collaboration project between the music classes here in the 4 schools in Pendleton County and a musician that lives nearby. And she is here today. We've introduced her, our musician, artist, beekeeper, all around wonderful person, Erica May is here. Would you like to say hello, Ime?
Sure. Hi. Thanks, Kellee. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Adam, for a great presentation. And thanks to all of our wonderful hosts at the Division of Culture and History and to all of the people here. Hello.
So we'll be hearing from her in the second part of this presentation. Okay, so, sorry, there's her website, so you can learn more about the work that she does and how to contact Miss Ime. And our story begins in July of 2019 at a conference room, back when conferences were in person, and a conference room in Huntington, where I was finishing up a 3-day training for my new position as Communities and Schools Site Coordinator. I worked for Franklin Elementary School here in Pendleton County. I wanted to tell you a little about communities and schools, as that was sort of where this whole project got started. So Communities and Schools is a nonprofit organization that has been around since the 70s. And they work to surround students with a community of support empowering them to stay in school and achieve in life. Founder Bill Milliken says that relationships, not programs, change children. And it's that very heart-driven philosophy and feel that CIS is built on. So the way that it works is Communities in Schools places a site coordinator to work directly inside the school to help pull together whatever needs are identified for either specific students, maybe the student body as a whole. This could include basic needs, identifying students that need food, clothing, and shelter, and collaborating with organizations in the community to provide those needs for those children. It could mean creating a tutoring program. Maybe the need of the school is that the math and reading levels are not where we want them to be, so creating tutoring programs or after-school programs to help address those academic needs. Maybe it's a positive incentive behavior program of just ways that we can reward the work that they're doing to increase how they feel about themselves, to make school more fun and increase attendance. So things like that. It's just whatever the student needs are, the Communities in Schools site coordinator identifies those needs and then works to address them. So let's see here. West Virginia Department of Education is a licensed partner of Communities in Schools, which I think is a brilliant move. They just completely partnered right up with this successful and large, fully flushed out nonprofit organization to provide this service directly into the schools. So over the past couple of years, especially through the hard work of First Lady Justice and Governor Justice, this program has grown to be in 23 counties, 116 schools, over 108 site coordinators. Just want to scroll down to show the map here. This is where you can see the expansion where they started piloting being a licensed partner in 4 counties in 2018. And now by 2021, Communities in Schools is located in all of these different counties. Typically, there's a site coordinator in each school of the county. Sometimes a site coordinator will share and will work in more than one school. It sort of depends on how that's set up. So I just wanted to take a moment to explain this in case there's somebody out there interested in Communities in Schools. You can access the information on the Department of Education website and just inquire about that. It's been a wonderful program. So let's see, back to the training. Hold on, let me get out here. Okay. Back to the 3-day Communities in Schools Site Coordinator Summer Institute. After 2.5 days of programmatic models and databases and timelines and checklists, in walks Mr. Randall Reed Smith, who I'd not met before. And he had the whole room of 100 and some Communities in Schools folks stand up and sing and tell ourselves how alive and alert and awake and enthusiastic we are. And it was just a real treat to meet him in that room. And among other things, he told us about this West Virginia Steam Power grant that was available. And basically, it's just these small grants that were available to fund projects that combine STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math with the arts. So right away, I got excited. I have a background working in nonprofits and have almost a problem of I can't say no to grant opportunities when they cross my path. So saw this and I saw that this was something very attainable, something that I could coordinate as a site coordinator. And I was especially excited because most of my previous work involved environmental things. So to be able to be required to focus on the arts was something that I'd not had the chance to do, and I was really excited to do that. So this was the opportunity to bring an arts project directly to my local schools. So that got me thinking, what are the needs in regards to arts in the schools in Pendleton County area? And on the one hand, we have a pretty rich culture of Appalachian music and arts and other various things. There's several groups that perform old-timey music. There's the Dulcimer Dames, and there's a wonderful piano teacher, and lots of talented local artists. We have a small theater here and individual jewelry makers and painters and things. But on the other hand, when I would think about the schools and the arts that happen in the school, there's just not a lot of energy left or devoted to the arts, music and band in particular. I know in the elementary schools, the art portion of the curriculum is done in the classroom by the homeroom teacher, and the students love it. They get to paint and they get to work with clay, and they just get to do whatever medium the teacher feels comfortable teaching. So that's really great. On the other hand, with the music department, 2 out of the 3 schools have not had a teacher for almost 2 years. So chorus and band, any music foundation has been taught by substitutes, which, you know, they work so hard, and I appreciate everything that they do, but they're not music teachers. So as a result, the students really haven't had much of a music education for almost 2 years. And then that problem kind of expands as they move into middle school, where there's trying to have a middle school band and a middle school choir, moving on to high school, a high school band and a high school choir. And by the time they get to 7th grade, there's not much, there's no oomph, there's just not much of a culture. So that was kind of what I was thinking of, is like, with this grant, what can we do to increase the culture of, in particular, music, but arts in our schools, so we can start to build back up a culture of music in our schools. So all that being said, after the conference, I thought to ask our band director at the high school, Walter Hoyka. He's been working for Pendleton County Schools for a good couple of years now. He's currently at the middle high school, but he himself is also a musician. He's played the fiddle in a string band. He's played violin in an orchestra. He plays piano. He plays wind instruments. He teaches string instruments to kids here in the community. So he's quite the teaching artist himself. And I went to him and I said, okay, let's say we had this grant opportunity and I'm willing to do all of the writing, all of the work, all the administration stuff. What would you like? What could we do? What would you like? And he thought about it for a couple of days and came up with the idea that he would like to get the Sibelius composition software, which Ime will describe a little bit better here in a moment. And this would allow students to learn more about music notation and to create some of their own songs using this software. And I thought that would tie into the STEM portion of the grant. So that sounded really great. And I loved the idea. So then I was trying to figure out, okay, so there's that piece, and Mr. Hoyka can go to each of the schools and teach how to use this software. But we needed something else. We needed another element. I didn't know what it was, but I started to hope of who it was and thought of Ime, whom I'd met in the past, but knew I'd heard that she teaches writing workshops and had done all kinds of other things as a teaching artist in the community. So my next step was to reach out to her and say hello and kind of ramble for a while about this opportunity and see what she had in mind. And she thought about it and made some notes and basically just took the project and ran from there. So at this time, I'd like to pass it over to Ime and get her perspective on her work that she did with this grant.
Thanks, Kellee. First, I think if you're an artist in the community and you're looking to get involved in schools, you should find a Kellee, because having someone who is so enthusiastic about their work in the schools, who is able to write grants, who is able to be a liaison to the school is just amazing. I feel really privileged to have worked with her. Like Adam talked about in his presentation, there are a lot of logistics that you don't think of when you start working in schools. So being able to have someone be like, this is where the Brandywine School is, this is where you park, this is where the music class is, this is who the teacher is, this is who the principal is, really just made my job a lot easier. So thank you, Kellee, for all of that background work. Just to give you a little bit about my story, I started as an artist. I'm a singer and a songwriter and a visual artist and performing artist. At a certain point, I got a job in radio broadcast and began working with the behind the scenes equipment. And I've always worked backstage also, putting productions together. So most of my day jobs have been in creating festivals and doing a lot of the work that I assume a lot of our other panelists and participants, attendees have even done, of presenting the arts in communities. And I love both of them. And what you see behind the scenes and what you see from the stage are two very different perspectives. In the middle, there's teaching, right? In the middle, there is an ability to share directly how something is done to students or workshop attendees who are going to take it and maybe create their own work with it, like at least within this safe space that we as teaching artists create. So I had, when I moved to West Virginia from Pittsburgh about 10 years ago, I started, like Kellee said, doing just small workshops at our farm over the summer, like a summer camp. We were calling it writing camp, but then it became arts and music. So it was WHAM camp, writing arts and music camp. When Kellee contacted me, I had also been working with the Tucker County just a few special events where they would bring like 200 kids in at a time, and we'd do like a 40-minute workshop on music. And they were like, do whatever you want, here's 40 minutes and 200 children. And that can be a little overwhelming because 200 children make a lot of noise. One thing that I love to do, and I need a carousel bell also, is really engage the kids from the start. So we start singing, we start in the smaller classroom, I would start singing too, and just share the work. But I'm getting too specific. I want to back up and talk a little bit about this specific grant and the process of how we were sharing this work in schools. Like I said, I worked in broadcast. So when Kellee called and said, we're going to use Sibelius, which is a composition software that you can both play an instrument or sing into, and it writes your score for you, but you can also go in and enter individual notes and then click play and it plays back to let you hear your music. So I thought this was a really fun way to visualize music, and also to be able to just kind of see what happens when you throw notes on here, to introduce the idea of repetition, because repetition is something that's really important in music. You start to hear, bum, ba-dum, ba-la-la-la, there's no melody, there's no not noticeable melody there, but if you hear bum, ba-bum, bum, ba-bum, bum, ba-bum over and over, you can. So I think that, one of the benefits of living in this age is that we have all this wonderful technology that can help with arts education, can help with understanding things like rhythm and melody. So I really wanted to focus on that for the Sibelius piece. And then bringing in my history with broadcast, we looked at how to use the technology, because most kids don't see the process of creating the art. Most participants, fans of the art or whatever, we see the product, we see the end result of what is sometimes years, decades, a lifetime of hard work. So I really wanted to just engage these kids in, what do you want to write a song about? Here's some things we can write about. What are you thinking about? Yeah, that's what a song can be about. Now, how do you amplify that to the level of song and not just, I'm going to say something? Like, how do you make it so that it's memorable? How do you make it so that it's interesting? Maybe it rhymes, maybe it has a rhythm pattern. So we broke down music into these parts. How do you then take this idea and create a song from it? Create not just a song that you could sing, but also to involve the tech and then the engineering. So we have the arts, tech, engineering, and arts of the STEAM, like 3 out of 5, pretty good, you know? And I think they had a lot of fun with it. I mean, just some highlights of the moment were, you know, some of the kids were exploring MIDI sounds on the computer. And a MIDI sound is when you play a keyboard through this piece of software that then can come back sounding like whatever you tell the computer to make it sound like. So I pulled up when we were exploring this particular part of this workshop. This, by the way, this was a multi-day workshop. So this was not all getting done in one day, which was really nice to be able to have a few extra days. And also made me wish that I had a whole nother week with some of these kids because we were just barely scratching the surface still. So they would hear these sounds back, and I pulled up the Farm Sounds MIDI program. So they're like playing the G, and there's a chicken squawking at them, and they of course loved that because it was different. You know, it doesn't sound like a piano. So again, I just really wanted to open these kids up to, like, they're, you know, they introduced me to TikTok. They're the ones that are seeing people on Instagram and Facebook. They don't see behind the scenes. You know, they think they're seeing this intimate view of someone, but they're seeing just the end result, just what people want them to see. And so flipping the camera around, so to speak, flipping this around to show them, this is how you use a microphone. This is how you use headphones. This is how you use the production equipment. And this is what you can get from it. And then there's this human element, of course, of, you know, what is the song? How are we singing it? What are we trying to say? What is our message? So if it sounds like a lot to fit in 3 days, it is, but it was also really fun just to kind of run through it. And we do, I think, have a couple of the songs that we can share and talk about for a few minutes. Just the end result. So just to preface some of this, we took some of those MIDI sounds. We also did a lot of found sounds. So I think we have the Franklin one still. We would record sounds in the room and then mix them into the production and see if A, we could still identify the sound, and B, if they transformed from something like a basketball, as you'll hear in Franklin, to part of the percussion. So again, these are the things that I'm teaching are things that I learned as an artist, as someone working behind the scenes, as someone who's been in broadcast and production. So if you're a teaching artist, you have a lot more skills, I think, than maybe you even know at first when you are walking into a classroom. So, you know, just honing that into, what do I want to say? What do I want these kids to experience? For me, just lastly, the reason that I love this work, the reason I love doing this work is because I had a young friend say, well, I don't know if she's very talented, very just naturally gifted, but also had a lot of good experience, good music teachers in her schools. And she said, well, you know, I don't know if I can be an artist. You can't really make a living as an artist. You know, maybe I'll do something else. And I was disappointed because she has that thing, you know, that all artists kind of hope that one day they'll have, but she had never been around professional artists. And I realized that after talking with her, you know, being able to be in a classroom and say, yes, this is what I do for a living, be able to be a member of my community and be, yes, I'm a professional artist, I think is sometimes that can be enough, just to be like, oh, this is something that is possible. So yeah, let's take a look at some of these songs. Just so I love listening to these, and oh yeah, so this picture here shows the, oh, never mind. some of the equipment we used were these little handheld recorders. So one other thing that was really important was just making sure that this tech was accessible. So that these recording units, this MIDI keyboard, the headphones, all of this equipment lives now at Franklin in this case, and at these elementary schools. The idea was that by the end of it, these kids learned how to use it and could then use it in other projects if they felt the need or felt inspired to do that. Not necessarily just musical projects too, because broadcast can be so much more too.
You ready?
Sure.
Presenting 4th grade Brandywine students.
I love you, Virginia. You done for, you done for.
It is a little bit intimidating going in front of the microphone.
Jumping, jumping, eating, food, money. Step outside into the open world. Oh, waiting outside is the nature around you. See the bunnies, cows, moose, eating carrots and grass.
Yeah, so you can hear in these in the song the just the layers. I think these kids did all of this. So let's do Franklin and then North Fork, if that's okay. Just because they picked out what they wanted the sounds to be, how they wanted it to go together. Yeah, I don't know. It's just fun for me to hear these again. So go ahead. You'll hear a guitar in there. The girl that you can keep playing it as long as it's not too confusing for the listeners.
To the countryside, I saw a basketball. It reminded me of my life and my love for basketball. I came home to watch the NBA, and here comes my cats to play all day. And I said, no, 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 no. I can't play all day because I want to watch the NBA.
So I would give these kids a lot of choices as far as how they wanted to, do you want to sing together? Do you want to sing individually? Do you want to write together? Do you want to write solo? So we had a little bit of both in every classroom. All the sounds are from them. Every student got to pick one sound. So every individual artist, every individual student rather, had this agency in these songs. And one of the really neat things that happened in Franklin, and really I think it happened at least once in every school, where I had a guitar in the classroom and they would be like, I want to play the guitar. And I'd be like, okay, do you know how to play the guitar? They'd be like, no. But they would have this opportunity to pick up a guitar, and then I'd give them like one basic chord and they could strum or start to, feel it. And I tried to include every single sound. I mean, I think we did wind up including every single sound. So if you hear a guitar, that's not me. That is very likely someone who had never picked up a guitar before. Let's do North Fork here, and then I think we're probably done.
One day on the farm, where the animals like to roam, stinky cows fill the barn, where the animals stay and have no harm. So the pigs smell like rotten cheese. Every time I smell them, I always sneeze.
That not that beautiful time.
Yeah. I do, one thing that I really think is very important too, that you can hear in that is like, when it comes to creative content, unless it's talking about someone, hurting someone or doing something that obviously we wouldn't want to be talking about in schools or sharing in that kind of forum. It's really important for me to allow a student to speak their mind and to speak their truth and to share the thing that is important to them at the time. And for some of these kids, it's silly. It's, you know, it's basketball. It's something that they love to do. And that's great. And we definitely had some students that were singing about things that were harder or a little bit more, just more from the heart, deeper. And to have that variety is something I think as a teaching artist that I really love to see, just how many different types of voices there are in the world and how important each of these students are. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, you guys.
Kellee, Ime, thanks very much. It's a great look at an example of, you know, how a school artist student creative collaboration, and Kellee, great insight into just where the seed of an idea comes from, and then how in your case it evolved into a project that you know, touched students in every school in the county, correct? I mean, that's a really comprehensive project that just started with an idea that you had when you were at a conference. So I really appreciate the insight into that. And Ime, thank you. I mean, the titles of the songs alone show you that you know, student voice and like their realities and the things that they know and wanted to talk about are in those songs. And yeah, I just appreciate hearing what they put together, and the fact that you gave them, you know, that kind of hands-on experience and the license to, you know, create a song about something that collectively means something, you know, to all of them. So anyway, great presentation. Really appreciate hearing about that project, and thank you both for working on it. Let us welcome Cindy Dearborn to the stage from the Huntington Museum of Art.
Thank you so much, Jim. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having me, letting me be here and have this opportunity to talk about teaching artists at the Huntington Museum of Art. And I just want to say that I really enjoyed all the previous presentations. Adam, Kellee, Ime, I mean, those are so great. And I just want to take this opportunity to kind of like build a little bit on that. So, you know, here at the museum, we do so many different outreach programs, and I'll talk more about them here in a minute. But a lot of what we do is not possible without people like you, Adam and Ime, without teaching artists. You know, we're a small staff, and there are only so many hours, you know, in a week. And so the way that we have such a great outreach in the community is by bringing in teaching artists to share, you know, that, I don't want to say burden, to share that joy of communicating with the students in the community. So I'm going to go ahead and share this technology, hopefully. Okay. Yay. Woohoo. So I just want to start, you know, kind of a little back in time. So providing these educational and cultural experiences for our tri-state region has been really at the very core of the museum's mission since our inception. And actually, even before the doors opened at the museum in 1952, volunteers actually visited area schools contributing to education in the arts. And so here's one of these great file photos that we have of, you know, going out into the community. And the museum wasn't even open at this point, which is just something that I absolutely love. You know, so we're getting ready to open, and here we are engaging the community. And so, you know, over time, our educational offerings have really grown. We serve nearly 30,000 students in a typical year. And Museum Making Connections is our outreach program. It's made up of 9 separate categories. We have after school, arts and medicine, artworks, classes, community events, Saturday Kids Art, summer camps, tours, and tri-state elementaries. And so while we still rely very heavily on our volunteers, mostly for tours, many of these particular programs are carried out by our teaching artists. And I'm going to highlight a few of those teaching artists and some of the jobs that they do for the museum. So this is Megan. Megan has a degree in sculpture from Marshall University, and she's currently working on her master's degree in art education. And so Megan wears very many hats for the museum. I particularly love her little scarecrow hat. And she teaches after school. She does art activities at community events like what's pictured here. This one festival was a fall festival at the Wild Ramp in Huntington, and the other pictures are from the United Way's Success by Six program, which encourages early learning and school readiness. And so she goes out into the community and you know, talks to people and talks about the museum and gives them the opportunity to be creative. Megan also is part of our Arts of Medicine program. And Arts of Medicine is for patients undergoing chemotherapy in our local hospitals. And it really gives adults and children a creative outlet, so it helps to enhance their healing process. And so with her personality, she's just able to go into those hospitals and really, you know, kind of take the mind off the patient and what, you know, what they're dealing with, what they're struggling with, and gives them sort of this creative way to maybe channel the pain. Amanda. So Amanda is a professional photographer. She divides her talent between taking all those special moment photos, capturing all those moments for her clients. And then she also has her very own line of work that she makes. And you can see that in the one picture on the right, I think. It's a lot of nature inspired photography. But Amanda also is Tri-State Elementaries. And Tri-State Elementaries for the Huntington Museum of Art is our second grade outreach program, where we send one of our teachers into all second grade schools in our region, and they give a presentation about the museum. They also offer hands-on art activities. We're fortunate that Cabell County, which is where the museum is located, has art teachers in every school. So all the students have access to art, but some of those more rural or outreaching or outlying counties don't have art teachers. And so this is kind of a way to bring an artist into the classroom to kind of, you know, look at things through the artist's eye. And this particular project is a STEAM project, which we received funding from the West Virginia Department of Arts, Culture, and History and the Benedum Foundation through the STEAM Power West Virginia grant. And so this hands-on activity, we're making a three-dimensional fish. And so we talk about fish and how fish live and how fish operate. But we also take cues from the museum's collection, and we talk about the elements of art, and we show different examples of artwork. And, you know, I mean, there has to be fish in the artwork. So it's really a great program that we have. And when we received the grant from the state, we were actually able to reach counties that we hadn't been to in a really long time. So like Boone County, Kanawha County, you know, pretty much we're kind of centered here in Cabell, Wayne, Lincoln, Mason, you know, those are kind of our core counties. So we were able to reach a little bit out. And even though the funding didn't provide for travel into Ohio, Amanda was able to go, you know, pretty far into Ohio as well. But and tours. So Jim mentioned before that, you know, I started here at the museum really working with tours. And so it is really near and dear to me. And I just love this picture, what it captures. You know, you think of an art museum and you would normally just think visual artists, but that's not always the case. Adam has actually been here before. He was part of our gang lecture series and spoke with our Saturday Kids Art program, and then also did an activity for our tour guides, our docents, and also a community presentation. And it was fantastic. And I remember him telling me after we did the docent training, he said, "You were hooked all the way through that story." He said, "I could just tell." And I was like, yeah, I was visualizing everything you said. And it was so great. And this tour, this is what we call Look, Listen, and Move. And so this is art and dance and music combined. And so we bring in a local musician, Steve Hall. He's also a professor at Marshall University, but he is out there. He performs with so many people. He's performed with Landau Eugene Murphy. He has performed in Germany. I mean, he's traveled and just, done so many great things. And the dancers are from 4th Avenue Arts, and Jessica Fox runs that dance company. And so this is the last performance that we did for this tour of that season, and it was celebrating 10 years. So it's been 10 years that we've worked together with this group to do this tour. And so Look, Listen, and Move, like I said, integrates the art, the music, the dance, and all under the theme of rhythm. And so this tour actually started back in the 70s with Janet Brownlee and the Huntington Symphony Orchestra. And so over time, it's just evolved. And so what happens is in the gallery, the dancers dance, Steve performs the music, it's a collaboration. We get the kids up and moving, so it doesn't happen in the auditorium on the stage, it happens in the gallery with the art, which is just so cool, because you'll watch the dancers and hear the drumming and, you look up and there's, this beautiful scene behind them. And so one of the things that they do is they actually bring the art into the performance. So they interpret the art in dance and in music, and then they get the kids' involvement, which picture did you see us dancing like? And so it's really kind of great to hear those interpretations from the kids. We also do 4th Tuesday tours. I promise I don't always make everybody dress up. It just kind of happens a lot. Our 4th Tuesday tours really range the gamut. So sometimes it's just a gallery walk. Sometimes it can be a talk with the artist. We have had dance performances with Jessica and her troupe and Steve, of course, and some other local musicians. We've done some Halloween themed activities where we brought in some artists to do activities in our gallery for students. And so this is just a really great, opportunity to kind of, do something a little different, kind of showcase the art in the gallery in a slightly different way. We also have what we call Saturday Kids Art program. And so Saturday Kids Art takes place every Saturday from 1 to 3. It's sponsored by Cabell Huntington Hospital, and it provides free art activities for students, typically kindergarten through 5th grade, but really, a little younger, a little older, you can all come. A lot of parents get involved as well. And so teachers have kind of moved through this program quite a bit. In the big picture here, we see Caitlin, who was in the previous picture as Frida Kahlo, and Emma, and they were both in school together. They, were learning, studying art, and Emma's moved through the program. Caitlin is still here, and she actually is now an art teacher in the Ohio school system. And then Charity in the back. And Caitlin and Charity came to the museum through their art education classes as part of what we called service learning. And so I really had the opportunity to get to know them at that point and work with them. And so once they, were further on in their education, it became apparent that they were definitely going to be great teachers. And so we wanted to, hold on to them, of course, at the museum. So we said, here's some jobs. Here's some opportunities for you guys. And they've stuck with it. And even though they're both full-time teachers, they still make room for us in their lives by coming to 4th Tuesdays and providing art activities, by hosting Saturday Kids Art every week and coming up with new projects. And so we're really grateful for them, of course, as well. We have all of our teaching artists. This is Kathleen Neepsey. If you've been around the museum, you know Kathleen. She has been involved with the museum since she was 8 years old. And when she took her first clay class, actually here at the museum, it sort of stuck in her head and she realized, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm going with my life. And so she did. She studied. She has a bachelor's degree, a master's in teaching, an MFA in ceramics. And she is our artist in residence here at the museum. And so what that really means is she takes care of our clay studio. Here at the museum, we have behind the main building, we have a series of studios where we do classes and workshops. And so Kathleen teaches all of our clay classes. She works with adults, she works with kids, she teaches high school and middle school camp. She does activities for tours. You can see her standing on the table. We had a giant group of kids that day. And so to make sure that everyone could see Kathleen, she just hopped up on the table. So it was great in the before times. And then of course, the other picture of her is with her work. So not only is she the artist in residence and runs the classes and maintains the studio, she also makes her own work, which she exhibits and she sells. She's also a mom of 3, she'll tell you too. She's a very busy person. But like, you know, we couldn't do the things that we do with the museum without people like Kathleen, without the people who have the artistic background and the knowledge, and who have the willingness to share that knowledge with everyone. Another big program we have here at the museum is the Walter Gropius Master Artist Program. And this kind of is part of our classes and workshops. You know, in addition to regular clay classes, we also offer photography classes, watercolor classes, painting, drawing classes, figure drawing classes, and various, you know, kind of independent workshops here and there. But the Walter Gropius program has been in place for almost 30 years. And what this program consists of is bringing nationally and internationally known artists to Huntington. They have an exhibit at the museum, they give a public lecture, and they do a 3-day workshop, an in-person workshop where the participants get to have that one-on-one really access and classroom time basically with someone who is working at the top of their field, someone who is out in the art world making art. You know, sometimes these people are professors, but a lot of times they're really just focused on making their art. And then of course, by doing workshops, sharing their experience, their knowledge with people. And so we've had quite a group of artists come through, from ceramics, of course, drawing, printmaking, painting, photography, fiber arts, you name it. We've probably done a workshop in it over that time. And we've had some pretty heavy hitters come through the museum's program. We've actually had 3 MacArthur Genius Award recipients who have been Gropius artists, Carrie Mae Weems, Joyce Scott, and Judy Pfaff. So woo, go March Women's History Month. And these workshops really provide an opportunity for our local artists community, or people who are, you know, interested or dabbling, or people who are trying to be a professional artist. And it gives them sort of that chance to grow, that chance to learn from people working in the field. And so this is just, you know, another opportunity. And there's, you know, everybody kind of talked about the logistics, and Adam and Ime talked about, you know, the schools and finding about, you know, where the bathroom is, very important, but also how do you get paid? And so there's a lot of, for us, there's a lot of logistic things that happens when we employ the teaching artists. You know, you're not given a timesheet. You know, you don't punch a clock. So it's making sure that you get paid, that your payment is, you know, worth your value. You know, everybody says, well, how long does it take to make, you know, a cup in ceramics? And, you know, well, why is it so expensive? And, you know, they never are. But it's, you know, you're not just drawing from that one moment where it takes you to make that one piece, or to tell that one story, or to listen to that one song. It's that whole history, your whole life that brought you to this point to make that one piece. And so as artists, you know, you have to really advocate for yourself to make sure that you are compensated properly. And that's a hard thing to do. It's always hard to ask for money, right? So I want to move on a little bit. So these are all things that we would do, in a typical year where we would see, the nearly 30,000 students and adults. And then there was COVID. So we all know that a year ago, COVID-19 arrived and everything just stopped. The museum closed to the public and all of our in-person activities were canceled. So all of our teaching artists were now without their museum work. And so as the staff members, we panicked, we stressed, we cried, but we also pivoted and then we started to really plan and we got back to work. And so while our doors were locked, we created HMOA at Home. And so this is a virtual programming platform, which allowed us to create ways to connect to our community and to engage the people. But it also gave us an opportunity to bring back some of the teaching artists. Because like I said, when everything shut down, there's people without, if you weren't a teacher or a doctor or a nurse or, you sort of found yourself just completely without work. And I'm sure Adam and Ime, you guys probably experienced that completely. And so we thought, oh, well, it's not going to be that long. We'll just, tide things over. And here we are. So, the things just looked different for the museum. It wasn't that in-person thing, that thing that we value so much. So we had to think of it a little bit differently. And so we created these virtual programs. And so we have Friends and Neighbors with Mr. George. Mr. George is our museum educator, but this allows him the opportunity to talk about different artists, different artwork, and meet with even community members, teaching artists, and kind of highlight what they're doing while the museum was, closed. So, and we're still not doing in-person activities here at the museum. We hope to soon-ish, but we don't know. Our classes, our workshops, our classes were shut down. So we did some video presentations with Kathleen where she got on the wheel and she'd make a cup or she'd make a bowl or she'd show how to do something. And then our Saturday Kids Art. I mean, we just love having those kids come to the museum every week and their parents. And so by doing it virtually, we allowed Caitlin and Charity the opportunity to continue working for the museum. So they were getting paid. But then they were also putting out weekly content, and creating with kids. And so it's been really fun to see a lot of those things get shared back with us, what the kids are doing at home while they're watching the videos with Caitlin and Charity. And so all of these things are pre-recorded and then just released at a certain time. And so people can go back and watch them over and over again or pause or, whatever you need to do. And we transition tours as well. So our Look, Listen, and Move tour, where we had that big group shot, we just did it virtually. So we brought in our performers, our dancers, our musician, we brought in a videographer, and we filmed it in our galleries. And so it, is the same type of performance, but just without the audience, which of course we miss because the audience is so key because their reactions are priceless. And then Add It Up is a third grade math tour. And so we brought in, we brought back our Mr. George character and with our museum volunteer docents and kind of, mashed it up that way. But then also like for the Fourth Tuesdays where we would have performances in the galleries, we did those virtually. And so our Fourth Avenue Arts, we had a big Bauhaus exhibition in the fall. And so we kind of did all things German culture. So they did a Grimm's fairy tale performance and they actually opted not to do it in the museum and film in the museum. They actually did it on our nature trails and filmed it there. And so then we released it as one of our Fourth Tuesdays. And again, so it's, it's putting the dancers to work, it's putting the videographer to work, it's putting the costume designer to work, the musician. So this is really great. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And so the big thing that we did as part of the Bauhaus program in the fall, we took our Walter Gropius Master Artist ceramic workshops and made it virtual. So these 6 artists were supposed to come to the museum. we were going to have an in-person workshop, a lecture, you know, an exhibit here at the museum. And so with COVID, we couldn't do that. We still wanted to do this because it's a great opportunity. These are great artists. We didn't know when we'd be able to get them back together again. So we went virtual, and we put the artists to work at their homes. So they filmed everything for us, and then they sent us the videos. And Sadie, our education coordinator, cried a lot. One artist sent us over 200 videos just on firing pottery. So she had a lot of editing and condensing to do, but it worked. You know, we were able to get it done, and we were able to present this as we would have normally in person, just virtually. And the cool thing about virtual programming is that sometimes you reach a bigger audience than what you would have normally in the museum. So had we had this in-person activity, we would have maybe hit 50 people, sort of our max capacity. Now that it's virtual, these 6 videos of the artists, they have reached over 70,000 views. And so that's like huge. We don't know what's going on. It just, we think some of the artists are having a competition where they're like, oh, I'll show you, I can get more video, I can get more views. But you know, it's been great for us. So this worked out really well. And so again, we were able to still employ these artists and have them do their workshop, have them show their exhibit, just in a different platform, in a virtual platform. And so I just want to end here on this note. We are so grateful to our teaching artists, from those that work here nearly every day when it's normal, to those that just spend a few days with us. They really make a huge impact on our community. And so I thank you all very much. And I thank our teaching artists. And we'll let Kathleen's arms take a break. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy. And thank you, Kathleen, for walking us off there. Well, Cindy, really appreciate it. I mean, and that's a great, in a very short time, you know, you gave us some insight into the tremendous scope of arts education at the museum, and, you know, how it reaches students and the community at large, and really the as I mentioned in the very beginning, the versatile role that teaching artists play in really carrying out all those programs. So thank you so much. And I know, you know, between the 3 presentations, it shows a rich diversity of programming and different kinds of art forms, different kinds of projects. And yet, as almost everyone here knows, you know, that's just really scratching the surface of what's happening with teaching artists and in arts education. So I just thought this would be a nice moment to really show appreciation for the teaching artists, whether you're touring, you know, going into schools, whether schools are coming to you at your community arts organization, your facility, your after school program, teaching artists who are individually and entrepreneurially out there just finding work and enhancing their lives and their practice as artists. It's all part of the picture. And I think these 3 examples that we've seen today are just a great way of giving us some indication of the breadth of the work. So anyway, thank you all so much for these presentations and for reminding us, you know, what it's like to really do the arts education work in the school or in person when the students come to you, and just giving us something to really be optimistic and positive about, and to look forward to for upcoming times when we're able to do this work in person again, you know, and for other ways to do it in the meantime. So thanks again to everyone. We have just a few minutes if there are any questions. I haven't seen any yet in the chat or the Q&A. So now would be the time if you have anything that you'd like to ask any of the panelists, or any comments. While you're formulating your question, if you have one, I will just remind everyone that we have a lot of great sessions coming up. The next one is going to begin at 11 o'clock. And that is going to be arts revitalization and healing in West Huntington. And the presenters for that are going to be Brandon Dennison, Lauren Kemp, and Margaret Mary Lane. So that's 11 o'clock. We also have arts groups thriving during the pandemic at 1:30, and then a great music education session at 3:30 today with a great panel talking about the really the nuts and bolts and even the scientific issues involved with safely getting back into rehearsal and performance from a music education standpoint. So that's all to look forward today. Also, just a reminder, as Lance said at the beginning, you've received a link and you'll receive another one for a survey about the conference and about some of our planning in general. So please, when the conference is completed, take a minute to return that to us, please. I'm just going to take a quick look to see if we have, yes, here we go. Here's a question about the homeschool community. And Melissa says, I believe this is a missed opportunity. Are grants provided for those children's education as well? And then another question that says, do any of the presenters think that video workshops will continue to be a regular feature for workshops in the future? I'll take a quick shot at the first question about homeschool. From a grants standpoint, I certainly would invite you to contact me directly, and we can talk about that more. I think there are ways to include homeschool students in our existing grant opportunities, whether that's through homeschool associations or other nonprofits. I would have to look into some of the details of that, and I think it would depend on the individual applicant. But I feel that there are ways to make that work for sure, and also through other community organizations too. Anyone else that has any thoughts on that, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I have. I just want to say that the summer camp that I worked on was initiated by a homeschooling parent who said, hey, I want to keep the writing, there's a word for it, the summer learning that drops when you don't have kids writing and reading all summer. Attrition, maybe is the word I'm looking for. But yeah, she approached me and said, hey, you're a writer and we'd love to have, and you have some experience teaching, would you be willing to do a summer tutoring thing? And that's when I said, well, it'd be really great to be able to offer this to more students, and then it keeps them more engaged. Let's do a camp. And so she got a bunch of other homeschool parents. So, I mean, not that homeschooling parents really need more on their plate, but that's just an example of someone who took the ball and ran with it and contacted a local artist in her community to do this work. I do also think that and Jim, I love that you're opening the door to that conversation, because I think a lot of things like opportunities that happen for homeschool students can happen through the local schools also. So maybe being in touch with Jim, being in touch with a local school that can provide some support for after school activities or direct support. That's all.
If I could just pipe in from the museum's perspective as well, all of the programming that we offered, like our tours, we do lots of tours for homeschool groups. A lot of times, there's a group called Classical Conversations, and they kind of organize and come to the museum quite often. And we'll do tours of the galleries, we'll do hands-on activities, depending upon what they're sort of working on or focusing on. We might bring Kathleen in to do a clay activity with them. So that's always open as well. And tours at the museum are always free. Sometimes activities, there might be a slight cost associated with them. But you can always bring your group and get a guided tour for free at the museum. So those are some other, homeschool opportunities as well. And we have it in the past, had classes just for homeschool students. We haven't had any for a little while. Kathleen's kids are older, but that is something that we have offered in the past.
Cindy, just I'm going to bounce around real quick. We're kind of at our time limit here, but we have a couple questions open. Does the Huntington Museum plan on continuing with virtual programming?
Yes, actually, definitely it does. Especially, now while we sort of hopefully bridge the gap to getting back to in-person programming. We definitely have some artist videos lined up. Some of the exhibits that we have at the museum right now, we're making videos of the artists talking about their work, and those will be available shortly. We are going to do some more series with Friends and Neighbors with Mr. George, highlighting some other people in our community. And Kathleen Clay with Kathleen. We're actually very fortunate in that we've received a cultural facilities grant, and we've been able to do some upgrades in our clay studio. So plus of the pandemic is that we haven't had people in there. So we've been able to sort of reorganize things and get some new equipment. And so when the studio is back in one piece, we'll do more Clay with Kathleen activities. But I think there's a real opportunity, especially for some of those like Gropius lectures, for people around the country, for us to live stream those going forward, so that people not just in Huntington or from the close surrounding area can see them. So yes, we will definitely be doing virtual programming in the future.
Thank you very much, Cindy. I think that sort of addresses the other remaining question that we have in the Q&A as well. Paul, can you jump in for a minute? And also I wonder if we've got in the chat, there's a comment from Betty King at the West Virginia Symphony about classical conversations, which sounds like something we might want to all hear a little bit about. Is it possible to, if you're willing, is it possible to bring Betty into the conversation for a second?
It is. Hold on one moment.
And then I promise we'll wrap it up, you guys. We need to move on so we can get to the next panel.
All right, Betty, you should be a panelist now. You should be able to speak at least. If I don't know if you want to turn your camera on or not, but
I know.
There we go.
Hey, it's hard to break into the classical conversations groups because they're a very tight-knit group, but I've gone to their website and asked to be put in, and if I can get to one person and say, hey, we have these programs that you can take advantage of, then they disseminate the information for you. You just have to break in, and you do have to do a couple steps to get there, but once you're in, you're in.
Betty, is there contact information or just a general entry point about that you could share, either on just with us or on the chat? Or
I will try.
Okay, yeah, and no hurry. We can add it to our resource folder later. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Betty, very much for that. I hope you don't mind being called on. Okay, just about 10:45, you guys. I think that was a fantastic session. Thanks to every single one of you, all the participants, for joining us. I'm glad we could spend some time with you this morning. Sorry we can't see you personally, but thanks for making this a great session. Panelists, really, really appreciate it. Good luck to everyone. Have a great day, and please come back for the next session at 11 o'clock.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.